What happens when a governor defies his own party to fix a problem that's been decades in the making? On October 10, 2025, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed one of the most sweeping housing reforms in state history, even as some of the loudest criticism came from fellow Democrats. This is the story of Senate Bill 79, why it's so controversial, and how it could reshape California's neighborhoods, housing market, and future, starting with the homes closest to transit. This isn't politics as usual. It's about families priced out of the places they work. It's about 180,000 plus Californians without a home on any given night. It's about a state where the median home price has hovered around the stratosphere and affordability has slipped to a fraction of households statewide. It's about a housing shortage so severe that economists have warned of real consequences for jobs, growth, and opportunity. The question is simple. Will this new law unlock the homes California desperately needs, or unleash a wave of confusion, displacement, and neighborhood fights? Let's break it down. California's housing crisis is not new, but it is urgent. Only about 15% of California households could afford the median-priced home in the second quarter of 2025, according to the state's realtors, reflecting incomes that haven't kept pace with prices and mortgage rates. Rents remain punishingly high in coastal metros, while vacancy rates in many communities sit near historic lows. On the streets, the human cost is visible. California accounts for nearly a quarter of the nation's homeless population, with many living unsheltered, exposing gaps in housing, mental health care, and services that cities have struggled to fill. The longer the shortage persists, the more California risks losing workers, shrinking opportunity, and paying a massive time tax in commute hours, economic friction, and stalled projects. Enter Senate Bill 79. Authored by Senator Scott Wiener, SB 79 aims to turbocharge home building near high-quality transit across California's biggest metro counties. The core idea, where there's great transit, there should be more homes, by right, and at meaningful density. Here's the headline. SB 79 overrides local zoning to allow mid to high-density apartments near major transit, with the most height and density allowed right next to frequent rail and bus lines. In practical terms, that means buildings that can reach roughly 5 to 9 stories in key areas near subway stations, light rail stops, and bus rapid transit, stepping down as you move farther away from the stop. The law focuses on major urbanized counties. Think Los Angeles, San Diego, Orange, San Francisco, San Mateo, Santa Clara, Alameda, and Sacramento, where transit access and housing demand are greatest. In addition to zoning overrides, SB 79 includes streamlining and ministerial approvals in many cases, limiting the subjective local veto points that have historically slowed or killed projects. It pairs up zoning with affordability set-asides, labor standards for taller buildings, and guardrails designed to steer construction toward transit-rich, job-rich areas. California has tried dozens of tools: accessory dwelling units, streamlined approvals, builders' remedy triggers, surplus public land policies, and more. But the numbers remain stubborn. The state needs hundreds of thousands of homes annually to catch up. Instead, delivery has lagged for years. SB 79 takes a bigger swing by rebalancing where the state says homes should go: closer to jobs and trains, to cut commute times, reduce car dependence, and make the best use of public infrastructure. Advocates argue this isn't just about supply, it's also about climate and equity. If more people can live near reliable transit, they can drive less, spend less on transportation, and live closer to opportunities. That's the YIMBY argument. Build more homes where people need them, and prices will stabilize over time. The fiercest criticism hasn't come from the right. It's come from inside the House. Los Angeles leaders raised alarms about local control, neighborhood character, and displacement risk. Mayor Karen Bass and the Los Angeles City Council voiced opposition, warning that Sacramento is overreaching and that infrastructure, from sewers to schools, could be strained without corresponding investments. Neighborhood groups, preservation advocates, and some labor and equity coalitions worry SB 79 could accelerate gentrification in vulnerable communities if protections and investments don't keep pace. They argue that where upzoning raises land values quickly, renters and small businesses can be squeezed before benefits materialize. The Newsom administration and SB 79's backers counter that the law includes affordability requirements, labor standards, objective design controls, and a phased timeline to help jurisdictions plan. They argue that cities have had years to solve these issues, and the status quo has failed too many people for too long. SB 79 is not an overnight switch. The core provisions phase in so cities and agencies can update plans, map eligible areas, and prepare infrastructure strategies. Expect state guidance and program rules to clarify eligibility, height and density near different transit types, affordability set-asides, and when streamlined approvals apply. Cities may propose alternative compliance approaches if they meet or exceed the capacity targets and housing outcomes the state requires. But the bottom line remains: transit-proximate housing gets a major green light, and delays will be harder to justify. If you own, work, or invest in California real estate, here's what this means. First, land near qualifying transit becomes more valuable, especially underutilized parcels within a half-mile of high-frequency stops. Expect early site assemblages, option agreements, and joint ventures as developers position for entitlement windows. Second, permitting sprint. Local planning departments will scramble to align local code with state law and to craft alternatives where viable. Expect a surge in pre-application meetings, zoning conformance reviews, and infrastructure planning tied to near-term transit nodes. Third, legal challenges are likely. Some cities and groups may sue over preemption, environmental review thresholds, or historic resource impacts, creating periods of uncertainty market by market. But recent court trends and the legislature's track record suggest the state's housing preemption agenda is not a passing phase. SB 79 is not a blank check. Projects must meet on-site affordability minimums, with deeper requirements on larger, taller buildings. Labor standards, like paying prevailing wage and using skilled and trained workforces, apply to taller structures and some streamlined approvals, shaping pro formas and partner selection. Sensitive sites, historic resources, high wildfire risk, or areas with unique constraints remain carved out or subject to specific criteria. The intent is to accelerate housing in logical, transit-rich locations while maintaining basic safety and preservation principles. Opponents are not wrong about infrastructure. More homes mean more demand on water systems, power, transit operations, parks, and schools. That's why pairing SB 79 with capital planning, impact fee reform, and targeted bond funding will matter. California's fees are notoriously high and timelines long. One reason so many projects never sharpen their pencils and break ground. They're also right to raise displacement risks. Upzoning without anti-displacement tools can push out lower-income households. That's where relocation assistance, right-to-return policies, tenant protections, community land trusts, and targeted acquisition funds come in. The state and cities will need to use them aggressively to make the promise of more homes align with the promise of more stability. Supporters are right about proximity. Housing next to frequent transit isn't just a nice idea. It's the math of sustainable cities. If California wants to cut congestion and emissions while increasing access to jobs, schools, and services, homes must go where the buses and trains are. SB 79 accelerates that alignment in a way California hasn't attempted before. They're also right that process is part of the price problem. Delays and uncertainty stack costs month after month. Streamlining and objective standards don't guarantee affordability, but they help make projects pencil and move from design boards to construction sites. Watch for early mover projects at high-frequency rail and bus rapid transit stops in Los Angeles, the Bay Area, and San Diego. Expect pilot corridors to sprout mid-rise apartments over ground-floor retail near schools and job centers. Look for new transit-adjacent mixed-income projects where inclusionary requirements blend market rate and affordable homes. Also watch for lawsuits that test the edges, historic districts, neighborhood overlays, or environmental claims. A few early court decisions could shape the pace of development across entire corridors. Finally, expect cities to negotiate. Alternative compliance programs, objective design standards, and infrastructure commitments will become the new deal points. Where cities lean in, timelines will shorten. Where cities drag, the state may push harder. If SB 79 holds, the second wave hits by 2028. Construction ramps along rail and bus lines. New supply starts to cool rent spikes in the most pressured districts. The story won't be uniform. Hot corridors will lead. Others will lag. But the pattern will be visible on the ground. More cranes, more apartments, more neighbors walking to stations. At the same time, equity concerns intensify if supports lag. Communities will press for stronger tenant protections, deeper affordability, and local hiring. Success will depend on pairing up zoning with real investments in services and infrastructure. By the early 2030s, expect visible urban nodes around transit stops, mini downtowns connecting housing, retail, healthcare, and classrooms within a 15-minute walk. Transit ridership improves with more riders nearby, and agencies finally see the land use benefits they've long argued for.